It's time now to review the headlines on today's newspapers. And unfortunately, our ombudsman is not here, but Mr. Steve, I'm sure, will do the honors.
Absolutely. We'll represent KK Owen very well. And of course, we'll start the review of the newspapers with, as always, this day on Sunday, the newspaper of record. The lead story says Tinubu, Buhari, Shettima, Atiku, Obi, governors, others mourn business mogul, Dantata. And the riders, Dantata was part of a family of traders and merchants who built the famous Granite Pyramids of the First Republic. And I like the way that you guys treated, that news yesterday during the morning show, the repeated emphasis. And I think it's well deserving of a businessman who did well for himself, and I believe, did well for the country too.
Yes, and I really loved the Vice President's statement about the passing of Dantata, because he also said that when you lose someone of that generation, you're also losing a bridge to the past. Correct. Right? Wow. He was that really, really hit me, because Dantata is an institution in himself, absolutely. A real son of the soil has passed, and a real bridge to our history as well.
Aliko Dangote is what to him now? Like
a nephew.
A nephew. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So let's hope that bridge will, there will be a connect, in the Alhaji Aliko Dangote.
Yes, particularly with the philanthropy.
Man. Absolutely. In that regard, support for courses, for education, for everything. And of course, we also believe in the Dangote refinery, doing great things for ordinary people in Nigeria. A few other stories on the cover of this day. APC governors back Tinubu's policies, say Ganduje's resignation in tandem with party's evolution. And so Ganduje is out, and there are speculations here and there as to who will step in. I'm sure that you follow, the stuffs going around yesterday, about, what could possibly happen to the SGF. And
I believe there's been a statement now to
there's a statement to debunk that.
The president is in St. Lucia. I think it's probably enjoying better weather over there than we are right now in Lagos.
Maybe it has to do with the fact that people think that sometimes when the president wants to throw in something big, he does that either on his way out of the country or when he's safely out of Nigeria, and then people will have to deal with it.
Pronouncements. That's how I like to call them.
But here we are. The APC governors are saying that it is in tandem, and of course we know that this will be part of the politicking towards 2027. Who will be the next substantive chairman of the All Progressives Congress? We'll wait. There's an acting chairman now, but of course we'll wait and see what happens. On top of that story, the strip story, INEC, we didn't advise PDP that we won't honor Koshedo's letters. That story is on page 6 of today's paper. And on top of the masthead, another strip, one presidential aide blocked Yar'Adua's letter to National Assembly, says Jonathan. I mean, good luck. Jonathan, former president, has been speaking, and is, going back to what happened in those days when the whole idea of Kaba, reigned.
A single aide blocking the vice president, an aide to the president. And I think, this is very fascinating, especially when we take it with the last story at the bottom about pressure mounting on Akume to resign as North Central renews clamor for APC chairmanship. I think it's so fascinating that we see a Secretary General of a federation perhaps being asked to resign for a chairmanship of a political party. And now we're seeing at the same time a story about a vice president, former vice president before he became president, saying that a simple aide blocked a letter going to the National Assembly. It shows the power that sometimes are in these aid positions or in these political positions and hindering the progress of our government.
He's just reinforcing, the former president is just reinforcing the fact that the whole idea of powerful cabals, started, under Yar'Adua. A few people who were so powerful as to deny, a vice president the constitutional. Well, maybe who is he? Or who is she? Kachi, we know that you are still there in Abuja. You will offer, some of your thoughts, but let's just run through this so that you can put it together. The window story...
Of course, I lost you for a brief second.
No, just a second. You soon join us. So the window story says George Elombi emerges next president of Afrexim Bank. Orama bows out in September and is buying out with a GCUN award, isn't it?
Yes,
you know. And then the rider commits to grow assets to $250 billion in 10 years from $42.7 billion. That's Dr. George Elombi, the Cameroonian gentleman who will now step in from September to lead one of the most impactful institutions that we have witnessed in the last decade or thereabouts. But Professor Orama, will be living with his GCON from the president. Not being a vice president, not being a... Isn't that beautiful and big, bold and beautiful? And this is what we used to say. But before we roll up, before Kachi comes in, the cover picture. The cover picture is also very instructive in the spirit of reconciliation, it says, and it's showing there the suspended governor of Rivers State, what's his name again?
Similaye
Fubara. It's been a while, isn't it? Since March that has been out with his former boss and godfather, shall we say, Nyesom Wike.
The current minister of the FCC.
The almighty Wike. And I saw when they, before they got to that function, they rode in the same car, and it looks like they're getting chummy again.
But I also believe that Similaye Fubara said he had no choice in the matter. So
it's a big lesson, It's a big lesson in politics and in governance. The sort of battles you choose to fight when you choose to fight. And this is not a condemnation of anybody or even an endorsement of anybody, but sometimes life teaches you raw. And it will be smart of you to learn early so that you can replan.
But I also think that this is a very interesting thing that's happening now because we have a president, of course, who sees himself as a Democrat and
father of all Democrats, he used to refer.
Exactly, and because we were talking about this, we had the June 12th celebration, we had the speech to the nation, the State of the Nation address essentially in the National Assembly, and on that very same day there was hoopla in the Senate because of appointments being made in Rivers State. Yeah. Now, even the senator in charge of overseeing the Rivers State administrator is not an indigene of Rivers State. And these things that are happening, we talk about them, and sometimes people brush them to the side, but they go to the core of how we see our democracy, how we see representation, and how we see fairness in Nigeria.
I totally concur. Fubara says that we have fought the fight. Maybe it is now time for peace, understandably so. Catch it from there in Abuja if you're still with us.
I think for me, beginning with the story at the top of the papers with regards to George Elombi. Interesting, I find that he's been with the Afrexim Bank for years, dating all the way back to 1996, beginning, as a legal advisor. So I think him rising up the ranks, it's been such a journey, and it's good to see him coming, especially off the back of the great work that Benedict Orama has put in. The 32nd annual general meeting taking place here in the FCT for the second time. The first time this happened was exactly 32 years ago, the first annual meeting to happen here. So I think this event was a very momentous one. Yesterday, we saw the Afrexim Fest, which ended with several artists performing, DJ Cuppy, Wyclef Jean, Casey, amongst others. It was such a good time. And I would say that also a good way to just remember the good work and celebrate the man himself, that is Benedict Orama, who's been instrumental creating several avenues for investments and progress across industries, from the creative industries to finance to agriculture and the likes. Now, yesterday we did speak about the situation in Rivers State. And Steve, you weren't here, but I said, I'm not quite sure, but I don't know if I would call what happened a peace deal per se. that wasn't necessarily a peace deal. Peace has finally come, but it takes me back to the crux of the issue, which is the fact that what was the reason for the state of emergency? That's my question. If it took the president meeting with the two stakeholders at the center of this issue, which would be Fubara and Wike, to bring some semblance of peace, was there any need for the state of emergency in the first place? What was the actual purpose of this? But of course, that still remains highly debatable, and a conversation that I haven't seen any end to. So I guess we're just going to have to move on from that conversation. We can move on to the next papers, which I think we can get into today's. We can get into the nation. Yes, we can start with the nation.
We have this day style,
We have this day style. So let's bring up this day style. We have on the cover of this day style my dear friend Folarin Falana, also known as Falz the bad guy, and they've called him there the artful provocateur. And while the cover note for this,
the artful provocateur.
Yes.
Wow, that's
yes,
something.
That is definitely something. And so the cover note says, if there is one thing about Folarin Falana will never be accused of, it is blending in. A trained lawyer who ditched the courtroom for the stage, the screen, and the streets. Falz has carved out a niche that's equal parts fearless entertainer, social commentator, and creative disruptor. Whether he's rapping in pidgin about police brutality, delivering satirical comedy on national dysfunction, or wearing lace like it's leather, Falz is always making a statement, and the country is always watching.
Absolutely.
And I think that, honestly, I love this cover note because it definitely encapsulates who Falz is. He's somebody who deeply cares about the country. He reflects that in his work and in his music, even if he's doing it in a light-hearted manner. But he's also someone who's a lawyer, and you know, his father also just got national honors, I believe, when KK did recently. So it's also a thing of, I think it's bearing fruits, you know.
Yeah.
It's coming from the tree here, but he also just released an album called The Feast, and it's a beautiful body of work, and it's very typical of Falz. You have the love stories, you have the comedy, but it also never veers away from highlighting the situation on ground in Nigeria.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, first, I love the cover. You know, this is very. Hold on one second, Kachi. Just a second. This is a beautiful layout. You know, part of what makes a paper, a newspaper, a good read is what you encounter, you know, from the cover. And I love the balance and everything. Every time you have a creative person on the cover of this day style, my heart leaps up for joy, because, you know, it is not every time that you will be having the politicians and the businessmen, you know, and sportsmen, you know, but creative people, you know, also should be celebrated. And I think that this is one of the... People
really need to get this magazine to see his full outfit, the full outfit spread.
Absolutely. Kachi, go on.
You know, I mean, to be honest, it doesn't quite surprise me to see Falz the bad guy on the cover. I think the essence of this day's style, honestly, you know, is celebrating people who are making impact across industries.
Absolutely.
And Falz the bad guy is one person that has successfully done this within the creative industry and outside of it. We take things back, all the way back to the NSAS protest, Falz' instrumental position, releasing that song, This Is Nigeria, and then bringing that back to 2025 with his body of work, The Feast. It's interesting because I listened to this album and it is literally a feast. Falz the bad guy has been donning a lot of lace attire, and I think that is also an ode to the idea of what a feast is in the Nigerian parlance. When you think of a feast, you think of your typical Owambe parties. You think of a moment where we come together to celebrate, to merry, to eat. And that's exactly what the entire album is. You're listening to eat like you're having the best plates of jollof rice and chicken. I would say my favorite song on that body of work is No Less, which I believe is everybody's favorite. And if you guys haven't listened to it, you definitely should. According to Falz the bad guy, he would say, I dare you to listen to that song and not bust a move.
Fantastic. You have another paper you are going to deal with there very quickly. We have little time left, Kachi. Or should we go to...
Yes, very quickly. Okay, we can just get into The Nation today, The Nation on a Sunday, which again leads with the same story that we just touched on. Fubara, River peace terms, heavy, bitter, but necessary. That's the part I think lots of Nigerians need to understand. heavy, bitter, but necessary. Why does it need to be necessary that he does only one term, for instance? These are questions that are still arising. Off the back of that, we see Fubara beg supporters to accept new conditions for peace. A governor is begging his followers to accept these new conditions that were not set by him, but he has to accept in order for peace to happen in the states where a state of emergency was declared because of him, apparently. It also goes on to say off the back of that, the Wike Governor Amewule make public appearances after the Abuja parley. That's, of course, the meeting that led to the peace deal. We also see further conversations on the APC chair. Battle for Ganduje's successor begins. Tinubu, Buhari governors, we spoke about this yesterday extensively. Other governors mourn as Dantata dies at 94. And of course, a very interesting story, a story by Jonathan, My Struggles to Succeed Yaradua. You will find that on page 4. I believe those are the major stories that we are taking a look at. There is a bit of story in the lifestyle industry with Chris Ire's latest collection selling out in a single day. I think that's a pretty big deal, actually.
All right, Kachi. I mean, wisdom will be profitable as far as Fubara is concerned. But let's look at one more paper before we go because of time. Sunday Telegraph, we'll look at it. And I think there are 3 stories do stand out there. The cover story, APC, how Northeast governors forced Ganduje out, accused of working against VP Shettima. And North Central eyes Almakura Mustafa as likely successors. AP governors endorse resignation. Ex-party chairs conduct exemplary. That's Peter Obi speaking there. And then on top of that, the second lead, Benue genocide. Return us to our homes. That's survivors crying out. Return us to our homes. Claim over 200 lives lost. How terrorists, or other riders, how terrorist herders killed our relatives, burnt houses. And then Tinubu CDS, police vow to curb attacks. And then for those who are in the audiovisual industry, particularly Nollywood, there's a story on page 30 of today's paper. Nigerian filmmaker Kayode Peters dies in Canada, I believe at age 49. A lot of the Nollywood sites have been buzzing since yesterday when that gentleman was declared to have, passed on. Our condolences to his families and to his colleagues. But those are the stories that we're able to take. Kachi in Abuja, keep on enjoying the FCT. Thanks for joining us today. And that brings us...
I think it has been nice, but I will be back soon.
No problem. It's one house. That brings us to the end of the morning show today. Thank you for watching and do stay safe. I'm Steve Ayorinde.
And I'm Kachi Ofia. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Morning Show.
I'm Adeso Agiwa-Osage from our entire team here in Lagos, Nigeria, and of course Kachi over there in Abuja. We want to wish you a beautiful Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your morning and of course the rest of your day. Goodbye.